Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the Virtual CISO Moment. Matt Quammen joins us today. He is the president and co-founder of Optimized Cyber. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Greg, thanks for having me. I need to get a copy of that soundtrack. I'm going to start all our every meeting I have with a client that way in the future.
It kind of gets you going even better than like a can of Celsius sometimes.
Yeah.
And by the way, I love Celsius, and the cola one is just amazing. I drink 42 of these a day. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow, they must sponsor this show, I'm guessing.
No, but they should. So if there's anybody from Celsius out there, hey, contact me. You can sponsor the show. So tell us about your career journey. How'd you get started in this wonderful world of information security? Why did you do it? And how did it bring you to co-founding Optimize?
Well, I got drafted into this. A prior chief revenue officer that I had worked for at a startup reached out to me, wanted somebody to come in and be his Midwest director for a network-based, everything's XDR now, but at the time, network-based managed detection and response. Mm-hmm. I told him I'm not a security guy. I don't like security, don't know anything about it. He said, great, you're coming aboard. So he talked me into it. I guess I'm pretty pliable in that way. But about 6 hours later, after I joined the company, I just fell in love with it. I grew up. My dad had an HVAC company. My grandpa was a chiropractor, and I grew up in a smaller town, 3,000 people, 4,000 people, where there was a lot of small businesses like that, and I guess small business is just in my blood. Some of the first calls, I think it was the universe talking to me, but some of the first calls that I had at this company were with HVAC companies. So my dad's background there, it was honestly crazy. It was like talking to my dad and getting to help people like my dad who, those aren't critically important businesses for the world or for the galaxy, but 40, 50, 60 employees in a small town like mine, that's pretty significant. That's 40 mortgages or 50 mortgages.
Your dad had a data loss event, right?
He did. He did. This was we'll chalk it up to an insider threat, where some long-term employees had taken a client list and greatly devalued the value of my company at the point where my dad was negotiating to sell it. So I've lived through that. I mean, that was back in 2005 or 6, something like that. So there were computers, and my dad, to this day, forever hated technology. So it wasn't in a SOC 2, there was no DLP involved. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay.
Somebody printed it and started a competing business about a mile away, and it greatly negatively affected the value of my dad's company. So I lived that on a personal level, and yeah, that's part of my journey of once I was drafted into cybersecurity, why information security, why I fell in love with it so much. So I spent time in the network MDR, spent time at an EDR company, spent a formative, it felt like 20 years, but a formative year and a half at an incident response firm. Oversaw about 700 cases, something like that, which ultimately drove the impetus for me to want to co-found this place where, I couldn't wake up and talk to people on their worst day anymore. It's, it's frankly devastating, some of these incidents, and you're in there with the hindsight, and you just wish you could have reached them sooner. So even though reaching people pre-incident is definitely harder than just making money in incident response, wanted to try to do it so we can help as many American businesses and organizations as possible prevent some of those cyber attacks that I've seen.
So what is the main what's the main services that Optimized Cyber offers nowadays?
So we're a cyber risk management firm focused on risk assessment and offensive security. So From a risk assessment perspective, we believe that if you don't know where you're at today, it's very hard to make good decisions about where you should take your security program. So we start with assessing and road mapping clients based on where they are. On the technical testing side, my co-founder is one of the best in the business, building offensive security teams. So that's not an entry point for SMBs or anything like that, but performing penetration testing, cloud security assessments, vulnerability assessments that help people find weaknesses before attackers do. So really two sides of the house, the risk advisory side and the technical testing side.
And you do work with small and mid-sized businesses on the risk advisory side, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. We have clients with 3 employees that were very forward thinking. Love those folks that even at that level, year 1 or 2 of the business, 3 employees, they wanted to stand up a security program that could protect their dream, protect their business. So those are some of the most rewarding.
So from your perspective, and also now having worked with folks, SMBs in the risk area, what are one or a few of the most significant threats to SMBs today? I would imagine that just based on your own personal experience with your father, that insider threat is going to be up there at some point in time. But today, what would you say is one of the most significant threats to SMBs?
Yeah, well, I'd say there's only 3. Well, I'd say 99% are covered by these 3. Number 1, financial fraud. Number 2, ransomware. Number 3, insider threat.
All right, let's talk about financial fraud a little bit there. So talk me through. What are we talking about? What type of fraud?
Yeah, anybody in the incident response space will tell you that financial fraud is significantly more common than ransomware, especially in the SMB. Data is hard to come by in this space. Obviously, accurate data. Not everybody reports everything, things like that. But I think it's a safe assumption that it's at least 5 times more costly than ransomware for small, mid-sized organizations. Probably 10 times more money is lost to financial fraud for SMBs than ransomware. Talking about financial fraud, there's a variety of ways that it happens. The most common by far is business email compromise. That's where an attacker will get into either the organization's email, and they're sitting there waiting to see how money goes out of the organization, waiting to see when there's going to be a big dollar transaction and getting that diverted to themselves, or coming through one of your customers, one of your vendors, compromising their email, again, waiting for a big transaction to be going back and forth and getting that money routed to them rather than its intended recipient. And
you use the word waiting there twice, which I think is important to emphasize, that these only work when the threat actors are established within the system, the organization, to be able to see the communication going back and forth, to understand the nuances of the communication, and then to interject themselves into the conversation when the timing is right. So to me, that would also then have a corollary saying that one of the more significant cyber threats is that maybe we don't do enough monitoring with SMBs.
I would agree with that. Or auditing, beyond even monitoring, I would say auditing our Office 365, our user accounts, our user logins. There's some free tools that you already own through your Office 365 licenses that can help root out these attackers. Let's talk about the good ones. Well, I'll talk about the bad ones first, right? The low-level attacks. That's somebody who sends you an email that says, hey, it's your CEO, get these gift cards. They may not even have gotten into an email. They might just be spoofing emails. They're sending text messages, things like that. It's really a spray and pray attack where they're getting, maybe $400 of gift cards here and there. When we're talking about business email compromise, we're talking about the more advanced attacks where, again, data is hard to come by on this, but you'll see metrics that average dwell time in a business email compromise is 9 months. So they're sitting in emails for 9 months watching to see how money's going back and forth. For my incident response days, they're waiting to see when the big transactions are going out. or coming in. And at that point, they're setting up a sophisticated attack where the PDF looks the invoice looks completely legitimate. It's the exact same thing with changed routing numbers. The email comes from a legitimate email, either within your organization or within the vendor's organization. And the only change is where the money is being routed. So and rooting out these long-term dormant attackers is something that we should all put a focus on.
And I'm actually I'm glad you mentioned that, because right now when we're recording, I am waiting for an invoice for a service that I just ordered for a client. And I had back and forth. There are different elements within the organization that I have to deal with. One is the sales folks that provide the quotes. Then there's one that you have to sign the quote for, and that then you agree. That generates the invoice, which then comes from the AP. So I'm expecting this. But if somebody's been sitting in my email, and this is a pretty sizable invoice that's coming through. If somebody's sitting in my email and watching this back and forth, they know that right now, as we're recording, not as you all out there in the internet land are listening, because this is days ago by the time you listen to this. It's already paid off. Don't worry. But right now it's a good point of awareness. It's like, even though I'm expecting the invoice to come in, that is exactly what they can take advantage of. And because a lot of times we say, well, if something comes in that you don't expect, ignore it. Okay, that's easy. But I'm expecting this invoice like within the next half hour. And so I need to be extra vigilant in case that somebody, unfortunately, is on my network or in my email. So yeah, no, that's a good point. Ransomware. How do we defend against ransomware?
Well, I would say prayers are always helpful. I'm never anti-prayer, Greg. But I would say three areas are where I've seen, if not 100%, nearly 100% of entry points for ransomware attacks. Lack of multi-factor authentication, too many user permissions on the endpoint, and vulnerability management.
Okay.
And when I say too many user permissions, I know this will upset some folks out there, but you can't train your way out of this. You can't blame the users. If you have local admins, if you have users that have basically domain admin level access, that is not a user issue when the user clicks on something. If we could solve human stupidity, we would. But what's a more effective strategy is to take away those permissions before an attacker starts to abuse them. So that's where I'm talking about too many user permissions. And then on the vulnerability management side, that's very difficult. That's not just keeping making sure you restart your computer or making sure we're patching things. This is inclusive of supply chain risks. Right. This is inclusive of 0 days. That's really, Greg, where that monitoring and being mindful of that's where we want to pour those resources into. But when we talk about the first two, multi-factor authentication, largely free for most clients to implement. And second, too many user permissions. That's all about IT security configurations on the stuff that you already own. So no new OpEx, no new expenses there. Let's make sure that we're stretching that security dollar as far as we can, so you can spend those resources towards monitoring for vulnerability management issues.
And we need to be careful about changes within the organization too. So you've got somebody who's in one department then moves us to another department. A lot of times we add permissions, but we don't subtract. So, and see that a lot in SMBs. Also see a lot in SMBs of the over-prescribing of privileges because it's just easier. And unfortunately, yeah, security can be hard, but it pays off dividends. So that good point. I mean, recovering from ransomware, what's the easiest way that an SMB can recover from ransomware?
Have insurance. Definitely invest in a cyber insurance policy. They do a great job of managing that ransomware risk. Now, we want to deflect and mitigate as many attacks as possible so that you're getting hit once every 10 or 20 or 30 years rather than once every 2 or 3 years. That'll also keep your cyber insurance premiums lower, these investments in security. But cyber insurance is the most most effective bang for your buck in fighting ransomware by far.
So then now going down the list, number 3, you mentioned insider threat. We already talked a little bit about that in the opener, but that can be difficult, particularly if you've got a disgruntled employee that you're not aware of, or if you have an employee, I saw something on LinkedIn recently where and I didn't jump into this conversation because I didn't want the drama. Yeah, there can be a little bit of drama on LinkedIn sometimes, but the poster, the original poster was saying, why do they ask for credit checks on job applications? And this is unfair. They shouldn't do this, and so on and so forth. And the point where they were coming from was valid, because a lot of times people have negative credit history because of the fact that they've been unemployed for a while, so it's almost circular. However, if you work in an organization like a bank where you're handling large sums of money, you have to have those financial credit checks, because yes, if you have bad credit, you could be a risk to the organization. So that's one way that a specific SMB can help deflect insider threat, by doing the proper background checks. But what's another good way?
Well, I would add criminal background checks as more important there. I hear the people with the credit being unfair. The criminal background checks, the amount of times I see news on somebody that had access to the funds of an organization and ultimately stole money, that had a prior track record of financial fraud, it's too common, right? On top of that, I would say business owners out there need to take ownership of who has access to their money. Just like we're saying, who has too many user permissions to cause problems with network security. You shouldn't have dozens of folks having access to money. If you do have people that have access to expense accounts and things like that, you need to regularly audit that. Again, these are not necessarily technical solutions. These are manpower solutions, and taking the time to do it. So those are some of the, I always start with the money, because that's ultimately what attackers are trying to do. And knowing that financial fraud is the biggest risk here, let's watch the money closest. On top of that, just understand humanity. If you've got a disgruntled employee, if you've got somebody who's looking to leave, if you've got somebody you're going to fire, let's terminate their access to the network before something crazy happens. I've seen that in incident responses where they've let go of technical people who then deployed malware against their own organization. Really stupid, because you likely go to jail doing that.
But criminals are never terribly smart, it seems like. But such a great point there, that so many of the risks that SMBs, and this would extend to larger businesses as well too, but so many of the risks are really not technically grounded. They're grounded in human behavior and understanding. And that's what, now I'm going to get on my info versus cyber soapbox for a second. That's why I'm always promoting the idea that our field is about information security, because it's not necessarily about the cybersecurity technical controls. That's part of it. It's a very important part of it. But and I think sometimes some SMBs don't realize that it's a broader field. So I appreciate you bringing that up. But everything we do in this field can be stressful. And if I could go back, I didn't actually choose this career field. It kind of chose me, like you. I kind of fell into it back starting as a network person back 35 years ago. It's been a rewarding career, but boy, it can be stressful at times. And sometimes I dealt with the stress well, and sometimes I didn't deal with it too well. I know that a lot of folks, they're having issues right now, particularly with like finding jobs in cyber and InfoSec, and that even compounds the stress. So it's important for people to always try to decompress from the stress of cyber. I emphasize that all the time. One of the things I do, like this morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, I was on my indoor trainer, riding on the bike and watching Star Trek Voyager, because I'm trying to watch the whole series. Never watched the whole series of Voyager. Pretty interesting show. What's one of the things you do to decompress from the stresses of everything InfoSec and cyber related?
Well, I don't go to family barbecues because I can't go anywhere. You tell somebody you're in cybersecurity and, a long lost aunt or an in-law, they all have questions, right? What should I do? What should I do about this? How do I protect my money, basically? So don't go to family barbecues is my first tip. No, I'm just kidding there. I'm blessed, Greg. I have young kids, so I don't really get to choose my leisure either. As soon as I'm done working in the home office here, they're doing something right now. I can tell you, they're in the backyard, either playing basketball or on the swing set or on a slide. They're playing a game right now called Bees, where one of them takes turn buzzing around as a bee and trying to sting the other. That's fun. So basically, I go back there and I get thrown into their mayhem, and it's just the best thing in the world to. I don't want to say compartmentalize, because I truly believe in loving your work as well, but it definitely helps you turn off the light of like, hey, we had a bad client call or bad prospective client call, or somebody's going through a terrible situation and we're trying to help. My kids don't care. They want to play bees or they want to be pushed on the swing. So I just get to run outside and play with them, and it's the best thing in the world.
The concept of play, I think, is something that we forget as we get older, that you can just take a break and play. There's an old Twilight Zone episode that Kick the Can, I think it's called, or something like that talks about the whole thing, and that's how you can find youth. So I don't have any children, but I do try to play when I can. So I totally agree with that. Well, outside of going outside and buzzing around within the next few minutes, what are some of your future plans?
My future plans for world domination, galactic domination. My future plans, really what I want to do with the security industry, is unite information security with IT infrastructure, IT security, and align it with all your IT investments, and align it with your cyber insurance. So I think when we talk about challenges to the SMB, I think the biggest challenge right now is that there's a million needles, and there's 100 needles that you need to find in a 1 mile wide haystack. The noise out there is just so incredibly difficult for business leaders right now. So what I intend to do is help unite your cyber insurance investments with your cyber risk management planning, your IT security investments, your IT investments, and everything you do on the infrastructure side, for an overall reduced spend on your large bucket here called cyber risk. I think that'll help SMBs as much or better than anyone, but it's an area that really needs to be unified. So that's my big goal for the future.
I love it, because another one of my soapboxes is that I feel that generally we as an industry, we don't focus enough attention on the SMB security issue, and what you were just talking about is sorely needed out there. I think it's a great service that you're providing. Appreciate you taking the lead in working there. The website is optimizecyber.com, if I have it correctly.
Correct.
My eyes can still read the other monitor without me putting on glasses, so I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
Everybody check out the website, optimizecyber.com, and you'll see the big blue screen that says Cybersecurity Streamlined, which is a great concept. It's about making cybersecurity not necessarily easy or simple, but it's about making it understandable and realistic for SMBs, more or less. Is that a good way to say it?
I would also add practical. So not every solution needs to be elegant or expensive. There's a lot of practical solutions that organizations can implement, especially talking about financial fraud and things like that are not necessarily going to win any demo days or high-tech solution of the world, but are very effective in mitigating cyber attacks.
Yeah, and for those who try to align to frameworks like the cybersecurity framework, you may not hit all of the elements within there, but that's okay, because you may not have to, but just you need to consider them all. with any framework you need to consider. So anyway, I don't want to start down the framework soapbox, because then we'll be on here for another 20, 25 minutes. Matt, it's been wonderful talking with you. Really appreciate you spending some time with us this morning and talking about everything InfoSec and CyberSec.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
And everybody, stay secure.